With the help of Hashem, we are learning Moed Katan Daf Yud Beis. We're going to be learning today about Amida La'akum. Amida La'akum on Shabbos. We're going to quickly quote the three approaches in the Rishonim as to why may one not tell a non-Jew to perform a malacha for a Jew, whether you're telling him that prior to Shabbos, whether you told him that on Shabbos, but he may not do something for a Jew on Shabbos. We're going to speak about Amida La'akum, how it relates over here to Chol HaMoed. We're going to see how it's amazing that in one area, the Isur of Malacha on Chol HaMoed is more Chamur, Hers, than the Isur Malacha on Shabbos and on Yontif. There's going to be something that may not be done on Chol HaMoed that could be done on Shabbos and Yontif. We're going to have more cases where we have this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, as we had on Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis. The beginning of the Perek, Shitas Rabbi Yehuda is that even when there's a davar ha'aved, and therefore you may do a malacha, you have to do it with a shinui. Rabbi Yosi is more lenient. He holds that when a davar ha'aved shinui is not needed. We're going to have a very enigmatic statement that hilchas moed ki hilchas kutim b'halacha. As we'll explain what that means. The kutim, in some halachas, they were very machmer. They kept everything perfectly. In other areas, they b'chlal didn't keep the halacha. And therefore you can't say, since that kuti is keeping this, therefore everything else is okay. Every case is a case. And we'll see by Hilchas Chol HaMoed, every case is a case. And now, where we began to develop that certain Amoraim were very lenient. Could be. But could be that these very Amoraim in certain cases were very machmer. Every case is a case. We're going to learn that when things are allowed to be done on Chol HaMoed, at times we emphasize the importance of those activities not to be done b'faresia. They should not be done in a way where there is a commotion. All right, as we learned, when was that, yesterday or 2 days ago, that takon of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, right, that don't use tools in public. There's a concept of chashad or a concept of maras ayin, or simply to bring down the ruach of Chol HaMoed. We're going to learn whether ha'arama, subterfuge, doing things oisnaden, finding certain hetedim, whether it is permissible, whether it's not permissible when it comes to work on Chol HaMoed. We're going to have 3 times on Daf Yud Beis the concept that we concluded Daf Yud Aleph with, Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, right, Mar, Adam Chashiv Shani, that even though the halacha says you don't have to go beyond a certain place, Adam Chashiv, it's expected of Adam Chashiv to be more machmer. 3 such scenarios, and much, much more. Without any further ado, Chevra, let's buckle the seatbelts because this is really wow. Daf Yud Beis, all the way on top of the Amid. When it comes to the sugya of Amida La'akum, having a goy do something for me. I know the word Amida means to speak. Here it doesn't matter whether you spoke, whether you didn't speak, whether you spoke on Shabbos or prior to Shabbos. A goy may not do something for a Jew on Shabbos. Now I know there are hetedim, but we begin from that point. Now, there are 2 ways if I'm doing a work in my property or on my things. There are people that I pay per day. They're called a schir yoim. And then there's someone that's called a contractor. We call that a kablan. That's what Shmuel is referring to. Amar Shmuel, mekable kiboilas. According to Rashi and many Rishonim, we're speaking about a goy working for a Jew on the things of a Jew on Shabbos, but he's not paid per hour, he's not paid per day, he's paid for the job, which makes it much less problematic because I'm not paying for him to work for me on Shabbos. He could have done this on Friday, he can do this on Sunday. He's doing it only for Shabbos because it's more convenient for him for it to be done on Shabbos. Yet, if the item that he's working on is known to belong to a Jew, whether this is real estate or whether this is even a movable item, but everyone who sees the goy working knows he's working on an item that belongs to a Jew, so there is a chashad issue. People might think that I asked of him to do it for me on Shabbos. So you can't do it. Now, tachlis, what does that mean? So if he's doing his work b'toich hatchum, again, this is sai metaltalin and sai real estate. So if the house that the goy is contracted to fix is within the tchum of a city where Yidden live, so then asur. Or if he's working on a metaltalin, on a car that everyone knows this is my car, and his shop is within the tchum, it may not be done, even though I'm not paying him per hour, I'm not paying him for today, paying him for the job. And like Rashi, the third line in the top brings down from Masechta Shabbos, Rashi says, don't compare this to the halacha we learned over there that I am allowed to bring my laundry to a launderer, right? Because again, I'm paying him for the job. He's called a contractor. That is okay. Rashi says, because when someone sees my undershirt being washed, no one knows it's mine. You cannot identify that item as it belongs to a Jew. That's the key. And by the way, the same thing would be with a mechanic, that everyone has the same cars today. My car is special, but your car, everyone's car is a Zelba car. So if it's not identifiable, it's not problematic. If he's a kablan, that means if you're paying him per job, you're not paying him, you can't tell him you have to do this today. Whenever it's ready, call me up. Masha'enk, in our sugya is speaking about an item that's identifiable, that this belongs to the Yid. Chutz l'tchum mutter. Chutz l'tchum is mutter because you're paying him for the job. He's a kablan, he's a contractor. Verstehst? Okay.
Because nobody will see.
No, but two details. The no one will see is the issue of chshad. But the first thing is he has to be a makabel keboilus. I want to give you an example. If I go over to the launderer, right? No problem. There's no chshad there, and I go there. Let's say it takes to wash my suit, I don't know, an hour, whatever the time is, and I go to him 5 minutes before Shabbos, and I tell him I'm picking this up Matzah Shabbos 5 minutes after Matzah Shabbos. I'm not allowed to do that, even though I'm paying him for the job, but I'm basically demanding of him for him to work for me on Shabbos. If he works for me on Shabbos, it's problematic. But if I gave the shirt in a few hours before Shabbos, as far as I'm concerned, he could have done it before Shabbos. Or if I'm picking it up enough time after Shabbos that he could have done the whole thing after Shabbos. If he chooses to do it on Shabbos, he's not doing that for me. He's doing it for him. Then the only problem is chshad. So that's when, if no one knows it's mine, there's no chshad. You got it, Shleima?
Is that the concept?
So I want to say like this, that there is a concept of b'chtei sheyaseh, and b'chtei sheyaseh won't be applicable here. We're going to be very machmir by the building of real estate, because whenever there was a chilul Shabbos done b'faresia, then we will not allow for the heter of b'chtei sheyaseh, as we'll see here. It's a very stringent Gemara. So again, we're speaking about movables or real estate. Whenever it's a contractor, that's the key Shleima, which means the goy was not told to work for me for Shabbos. So there's no issue of Amir La'akum, but there's an issue of Achshad of Amir La'akum. So that's the point. Amar Rav Papa, Vafilu Chutz L'Tchum, you know when, if it's outside my tchum, our tchum, it's okay. You know, the area, the mechanic, or my home that he's working on could be outside the tchum of my village, but it could be it's within the tchum of someone else's village. And if Yidden live over there, it's weiter problematic. If there's another city, and the work that's being done is being done within the tchum of another city, it's also a problem. And that it's okay. That's only for Shabbos and Yom Tov, because since on Shabbos and Yom Tov, people normally don't walk beyond the tchum. So if the work is being done beyond the tchum, I am allowed to presume a Jew will not see it. But here we go. But on Choyloi Shal Moed, now working on Chol Moed, building on Chol Moed is asur. Chol Moed people don't have restrictions in travel. Look at this concept. Therefore, the shchichi in shadu azli va'asu lahasam, people are moving farther away from the city. Megei shpatzir in Chol Moed. Then, even if the work is being done outside the tchum, it's asur. Here we have the concept. Let's speak about real estate. We all know that not only can work not be done on my real estate, on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, it cannot be done on Chol Moed, and there are less heterim for Chol Moed. Why? Because the chshad that is resolved by distance is the distance doesn't resolve anything for Chol Moed.
If this property is in a bad neighborhood, but it's in the tchum, but nobody goes to that neighborhood.
So these nuances we'll leave for Poskim. No, it's to point out that if it's a contractor, that's a big difference. If he's being paid per day, then he's working, and I'm paying him for Shabbos, that's asur. If he's getting paid per job, in scenarios where there's no chshad, then theoretically it's not problematic, okay? And we'll see in a moment that working on real estate is much worse than working on anything else, Because if people saw the work being done on real estate, tzamach, that's called a mechilul Shabbos b'feresia. And therefore the Bechdei Sheyasu won't help. We'll speak this out in a moment inside. Says the Gemara story. Mar Zutra b'rei Rav Nachman. Banu leya panda. They were building for Mar Zutra a palace. Who? How? Not by day laborers, which is more problematic, but mekabli kaboilas, contractors. And it was taka chutz l'tchum. And chutz l'tchum means, what we just learned, this is by the letter of the law, there's no problem. Nevertheless, ikla Rav Safra. And Rafuna bar Chinana, they went there, and you know what? They did not enter that home, that palace. V'loy olu ligabei. Furthermore, other people have a version that the owner, Mar Zutra himself, nami le'ol bigavei. And here at Tzemach, that's the big kasha. I want to go, normally if some halacha was done for me, when it should not have been done, we say, okay, no one can benefit from it after Shabbos, only within the time that it takes to make it. Say food was made for me, it takes an hour to make the food, so we say not only can I not eat it on Shabbos, I got to wait the hour, but after the hour after Shabbos, I can have hana. Here they never entered the home. It's amazing. Even though there was no chilul Shabbos, it's a contractor, the whole issue was chshad, and it was chutz l'tchum. Ay v'ha'amar Shmuel mekabli kaboilos only b'toichat tchum asur. Here this apandi was built chutz l'tchum. So that's going to be today's number one. It's already the second time we learned since yesterday in the bottom of the Amid. Adam Chashuv Shani. Wow. The expectation on an Adam Chashuv to go beyond is so strong that they never used that home. I know by the Rebbe there are stories that the people that came to him, if they came to him in a way that there was Chilul Shabbos, the Rebbe didn't even see them. Perhaps they never even saw the house. They never entered the house. They didn't see the house. They were tzaddikim. Because for their level, there was some type of Chilul Shabbos. I know it's a big nesoyim when it comes to Chol HaMoed. People build over here. People already were makabel. You can't build Shabbos. Not even on Chol HaMoed. Not even on Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed is worse than Shabbos and Yontif. Because more people might see it, because more people are moving about. If it's in an area where Jews will notice it. Let's go right. Now, Ve'ikad Amri, other people say that for the Chomer of Adam Chashuv, Ad Kedei Kach, for them never to use the house, that's not. There was a problem here. Problem is that they weren't exactly contractors. Why not? That there, siyue saye betivna bahadayu, that the Mar Zutra b'rei Rav Nachman, he gave some of the straw, some of the bricks, he gave continuously raw materials to the contractors, which shows they weren't fully contractors. His involvement was more than they're just contractors. And now we are touching the real issue of Amir La'akum. In other words, they worked for him be'isur, which is why he never benefited from that home. Now just say the words, to be familiar with the words. You have three reasons brought down. Why is it that if a guy works for me, God did not command the guy to rest. I cannot have hana. Here b'faresya, never. The lowest level that Rambam holds, it's a gzeira, so the Rabbanan. A normal day. That if I will be allowed to tell the guy what to do for me, or if I can have hana from that which the guy did for me, I might end up doing it myself. The classic gzeira. One level higher is already an isur midivrei Kabbalah, pasuk in Yeshaya, and the most stringent opinion is that we apply shlichus in this case. So if the guy is working for me, it's as if I worked. I ain't shliach ledvar aveira. I ain't shlichus la'akum. So it's a chumrah. So lo chumrah here we're saying it. And the Alter Rebbe who paskins from the Poiskim that the issue of Amir la'akum is because of shlichus. Therefore the Alter Rebbe and therefore we are very machmir when it comes to Amir la'akum, including building real estate, especially real estate, and even b'di'evid, as we are learning over here. Let's go right there. Rav Chama Shari Lahu La'abun Gorei, the Beit Eish Galusa. The Beit Eish Galusa, they had, Rashi says, Mesadrei Shulchanos. Mesadrei Shulchanos means is that they did a job, they were not paid with money, but they used to set up the tables. If the tables were broken, they would fix it, and in return, they would be allowed to eat with the oilam. So he allowed for them, he allowed for them to fix the tables on Chol HaMoed. Now, first of all, there's a tzoyrech HaMoed, make it clear. They were only allowed to fix the tables because you needed those tables. Problem is, what are we learning now? We're not allowed to do it. If I cannot do it, how can he do it?
Rabbi, is there a difference between something that's capable of being done quickly, like cleaning a suit, versus building a home, which is never ending? There's always another brick or another...
No. So Nachman, I know it's late, but the big sugya, but no, tzamach, like this. There's two steps here. Let's not confuse. There is a step of amira la'akum, which is much worse than chashad. Any work that I'm engaged, that someone is doing for me, that the agreement demands of him dafka to work for me on Shabbos, can never be done. Amira la'akum. There's another step. Even if he could have done it before or after Shabbos, he could have done it, he's only doing it for his benefit. If everyone knows that it's my item, they don't know the type of agreement I made with them, so mishum chshada, that's our sugya tzasa. Okay, let's go back over here. So hold on, how can he do it for me? How can he fix tables? So Amar kivan da agar loiko shakli, since they did not pay him geld, it wasn't a salaried person. It was only sharshu yehudu kama sharshu. They got some sort of indirect benefit. The indirect benefit wasn't that they got paid with food also, is that they were able to sit together and eat with the oilam. It's a very indirect benefit. Leis lan ba, which is a huge other topic, which is the Me'idi expounds a lot over here. That whenever it's known that the goy is working for me for free, it's considered for free, then already it's not problematic. Compounded, this is compounded with the fact that it's a tzorech hamoyed, because they needed those tables. Okay, let's go weiter. Next, klaloi, where I skipped a few lines. I'm sorry. Tana Rabbanan. Therefore, leis lamba means there's no problem, since they weren't getting paid. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso, mekabli keboilas, people who are contractors, they're not getting paid per hour or per day. B'moyed, you are allowed to enter contract on cholamoyed for a job to begin after cholamoyed. That you can do, because I can enter a contract on cholamoyed, even though they're not allowed to work on cholamoyed, for them to begin later. But ubemoyed asr means that I have to explicitly tell them, don't begin on cholamoyed. No, the Chazal did not want for us to use this as that will be the loophole. Amachayim. Make a contract. Don't be that clear when they begin. Don't forget, contractors, you don't get involved when they begin. It's not your business. You pay them for the job. Tell them not on cholamoyed. Klal shel davar. Kol shehu oisa. Anything that a Jew is allowed to do on cholamoyed, oimer lenachri v'oisa. You are allowed to tell a guy to do it for you. But the kol she'ena oisa, anything that a Yid may not do, ena oimer lenachri v'oisa. Again, gzeira, lowest level, or v'daber davar, mamsei chefzecha, divrei kabbalah, from Nach, from Nevi'im, or the highest chumrah is mitzad shlichus la'akum l'chumrah. Weiter. Tanya idech, we learned in another brayso. Mekabli keboilas b'moyed. If you are allowed to enter a contract with contractors, you can make that deal on cholamoyed as long as they begin after the moyed. However, it's very common that when you enter a contract, you give them certain raw materials. Like if you're giving people a contract that they should spin threads, you give them the raw materials. If you're giving them building, sometimes part of the contract is you supply for them the raw materials. Now, ubelvad, that on cholamoid, if you are giving them materials, lo yimdoi, don't give those materials to them in a way where it looks like you're doing just, it's business as usual, which is by weighing the items out for them, v'lo yishkol, counting out the items. I'm sorry. Lo yimdod, not to measure. Lo yishkol, not to weigh. V'lo yimna, not to count. Because then it's uvda d'choil. Kederech shu oisa b'choil. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso, ein mar b'yem behem b'choil shel moyed, another activity. That's called a tircha, which is not for the need of moyed. And that is for people who are into raising animals, or certain animals that they're not going to mate on their own. So you have to be very involved in mounting the male on the female. And it's a big tircha. And so if there is a need, but there's no need, it can happen before, it can happen afterwards. So, by the way, the same thing is when it says that a b'chor, even though when there's no Beis Hamikdash, whether the b'chor will become a korban or whether you have to wait until it gets blemished, the Torah says, Loi savoid b'chor, etc. Can't work with a b'chor. So that includes the owner cannot take a b'chor and mount him on a female, and similarly, Psule Megdashim is that when an animal was consecrated to be put on the Mizbeach, and it got blemished, and it was redeemed. So since it was going to have Kedusha's Mizbeach, so there's a vestige of Kedusha on it for those who learn Kachim, it's always going to be Asr Begizer Ube Avoida. You can't mount it. Tanya, another Braisa, don't be involved in the mating of animals on Chol HaMoed. However, there's an exception. Rabbi Yehuda says that a female donkey, she came into heat, that was the time where she'll be Mekabel Zachar. And if you won't seize this moment, that's the key dafka by the donkey, then she might not make Bachlal. So that's already a Davar Ha'avet. There marbiyan oleo Zachar. Besfil shaloik titztanen, because once she gets cooled off, that's it. Then the marriage is lost. V'shar kol behema is all other animals, all other female animals, even when they are in heat, it's not so certain that if you're not going to seize the moment, it's done. So you can do a little bit. What's a little bit? Machnis and oisan labakoides. You can bring all these animals into corrals, which is much less of a tircha. It's some tircha. Like this, there'll be many male animals together with the female. There's a higher chance that there'll be a union, but you're not allowed to be marbiya biyodayim. Tana Rabbanan, the first white line.
I'm sorry, why is it? You said it's a loss of their principle?
Yeah, because if a female animal now is in the mood, and if you're not going to get it right now, that's it. So
it's the loss of a child.
That's called principle. Yeah. When you raise animals, you're raising animals not because you love animals. You're raising animals because you want to have more animals. It's a business, right? Tana Rabbanan, ein medaiden. Now, bedaida means like this: that when you have property, you have to fertilize it. So one of the techniques they use for fertilizing is that either you owned animals or other people had animals. Animals naturally they fertilize. They're busy, so they would put a fence in a certain area on the field, and they would bring animals there, and the animals did their business, and it got plenty fertilized. Then they would move that whole corral or fence to the next little place. So says the Braisa, ein medaiden, you're not allowed to pen animals. Not on Shabbosos, not on Yomim Tovim, not on Choilo Shol Moed. Now guys, I want to say it like this. Actually fertilizing, that's probably Tulda de Zoireya, or maybe Chodesh. It's a Tulda, it's Asam Midoraisa. Here you're not fertilizing. This is only an Isur Darabanan, but it's Asam Midorabanan. Because I'm just keeping the animals confined in a certain area. And they will fertilize. That's an isur midrabanan. So, but still you can't do it, even not on Chol HaMoed. But the imbo ma'aleim. Oh, we're going to learn Rashi. Imbo ma'aleim means if goyim, whose job is they have animals that they make a lot of manure, and they go to the fields and they do this, and they came on their own. You didn't hire them. So the din is you don't have to kick them out, but you can't help them. Not to any level. Sometimes the balabas of the field would help them guard their animals. Don't do that. No type of help. Now, but if the people that come, they never get paid right for the job. There's a contract that's like us and our gardeners. You pay them, per week or per month. And they come once a week or twice a month or whatever the Seder is. That's already like a contractor, because here you never ask for them to come for Shabbos. They don't get paid. They get paid per week. And if they wouldn't come on Shabbos, they would come on Friday. They would come on Sunday. It's less problematic. So if you have that type of agreement, then if they come on their own, again, you don't ask them befedish come on Yom Tiv. But if they come, you can even help them. You This is, by the way, this is today. If the gardener comes on Shabbos and on Yom Tov today, it's okay. Happens the whole time. Why? That's like everyone, because there's no chashad. Everyone knows that the way they come, these people, I pay them per month. Everyone knows that. And if it rains or they're sick or they go on a holiday, they come another day. Everyone knows. So that's a real contractor, and there's no chashad here. No one will think, okay. Rabbi Yomer, that he holds that when a guy is coming to manure to be medayir the field on Shabbos, Rabbi is a bisal machmer. He says that on Shabbos you only are allowed to let him be there if he doesn't get paid money. If all he's getting in return is a favor, There is where you can allow it to happen on Shabbos. If they come on Yom Tiv, you can be more lenient, meaning even if they get paid with food, not with a favor, it's okay, but not if they get paid money. But on Chol HaMoed, that is when you allow them to come, even if they're getting paid b'schar. And Amar Rabbi Yosef, the Hilchasa is Kerebi. Now, the question is not here. Do we paskin like Rebbe, who's machmer? The question is how to learn pshat over here, and there's so many different ways in learning pshat. Bottom line is just saying halacha l'maisa that here in LA, when everyone has their gardener, we're not concerned. It's a good comparison. We're not concerned with Amira La'akum, and we're not concerned with chshad, because everyone knows that they're working for the month. They're supposed to come once a week whenever they choose to come. And they're not building real estate, which will be another big key, and therefore we are lenient. Let's go weiter.
However, Messiah also means that you can help them even on Shabbos or Yom Tov?
Yes. Don't forget, again, you're not fertilizing. They need help. They need whatever the help is.
So you help someone who is not a malacha?
You're not, even they are not doing a malacha, they're doing a darabanan. You did not even ask for them to come today. Yeah? Let's go weiter. Okay.
This whole working on Cholamayim, is this a diagnosis or is this a
So let's begin again. It's Shtayim Arba. You can say it's a machloikas d'oraisa d'Rabbanan, Danny, and there's nuance in both sides. Okay? And throughout Masechtas Moed Katan, every now and then there's a statement, as we'll have soon, we just have to get there, where it's mashma d'oraisa or mashma midrabbanan. And you can always learn a d'oraisa, it's an asmachta. And even when it says the Rabbanan or it's mashma the Rabbanan, you can say that it's a doiraisa, but since God did not define what work may not be done, Misorua, the Torah gave it over to the Chachamim to define it, so you can call it a Rabbanan, but it's really a doiraisa. Like the Inoyim of Yom Kippur is certainly that way. All the 5 Inoyim are doiraisa. Even though explicitly the Torah just says don't eat and don't drink. The Chachamim define that to be afflicted, you're not allowed to put on leather shoes. It's a Rabbanan that are defining what God meant. It's a high level, minimally it's a very high level of a Isur. Mishnah. This Mishnah is going to mirror the first Mishnah in the Pedic. What was the first Mishnah in the Pedic? That a person was not setting work for Chol HaMoed. The first Mishnah was about oil. They came to a point in the making of oil where these olives, if you will not press them, they will spoil. So, Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Everyone agrees, Davar Ha'avid, something could be done on Chol HaMoed. Question is, how much do you have to make a shinui? Same exact by wine, same concept. Okay, we're not speaking about people that knew that they will have to work on Chol HaMoed. They were working in a way that everything could have been and should have been done before Yom Tov. So they pressed the wine. When the wine now is in the vat in front of the press, you know what the next step is? You got to take it from there and put it into barrels and seal the barrels. What is the issue? Tircha. It's work. And you were going to finish it before. But v'ira yevel. Erev Yontiv, the person became a novel. Or, now, another case. Mamish the way we learned in the Mishnah before. Oy oynes, same thing with Chol HaMoed. Guy was working Erev Yontiv. There was enough time to finish the work. Something that he could not have prevented nor foreseen happened. And now he was unable to finish the work before you, and now it's Chol HaMoed. One example is that he hired workers, and the workers pressed the wine, and before they finished the job, they left. That's called shehit to you. They tricked him maliciously. They left. So now, Rabbi Yossi, it's interesting. Here, Rabbeinu HaKadosh brings Rabbi Yossi first. Rabbi Yossi holds Zoylev v'goymer v'gov kedarko. You can pour all the wine into barrels, and you can seal them in the usual manner. There's no need even to make a shinoi, because davar ha'aved, whenever we are allowed to do malacha, you can do it without even a shinoi. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, that you can't do it kedarkoi. What is the shinoi? Normally the barrels are sealed with this type of seal. Now you only put on limudim. Limudim means boards, some sort of temporary cover. Bishvil shaloi yachmetz, for it not to become vinegary, but that's unusual, and yes, you'll have to reseal it after Yom Tov. Now the problem is, the obvious question is, mamish the same machlokes we had in the last Mishnah. Why did Rebbe have to quote the machlokes both by oil and by wine? V'tzricha, it's needed, because if Rebbe only would have recorded their machlokes kamaisa in the case of the olive oil, one might have said by he, K'amar Rabbi Yossi, that you don't even have to make a shinoi, because that's the mitzias then. Guys, olive oil then was more valuable than wine. So more hefsid, more heter. The mishcha, nafish, pseida, by oil there's a greater loss. But one might have thought, avol when it comes to wine, since the loy nafish pseida, since the loss is not as great, maybe he would be moed to Rabbi Yehuda, that you can seal it, but only with these boards, bishinui. Same thing in the opposite. If Rebbe only would have recorded the machlokes by this basraisa, by the latter Mishnah, by today's Mishnah, by wine, one might have thought only by he does Rabbi Yehuda hold you gotta make a shinoi, because it's not the end of the world, meaning it's not such a great loss. So then cover it with a shinoi. Avol bahach, but by the oil, one might have thought Rabbi Yosi asvas, you can do it kedarkoi tzricha, that no matter what machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, and indeed Amar Rabbi Yitzchak.
Was this wine supposed to be for Cholamayit?
Doesn't make a difference. It's not because Tzayda Chamayit, it's because Davar Ha'avid. Because you are at a point, it's like the first Mishnah in the Perek. You came to a point where you have something beginning to grow in your field. If you're not going to do something right now, that which is will get lost. Okay. Whenever you learn a Tana, a Mishnah Braisa, and it tells you, you got to make a shinoi, remember that is not authored by Rabbi Yosi. As we learned yesterday, Rabbi Yosi holds that if you are allowed to do it because of Davar Ha'avid, you never need to make a shinoi. Amar Rabbi Yosef, more halachic Rabbi Yosef. Bo minei Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Another case that's not discussed, and by Tanoim, Mahu lemeisha chavisa de shichra b'choylo de moyada. Are you allowed to seal a barrel of beer? Now, beer is even less expensive than wine. So Amar Lahu Sinai Amar Halachi Ke Rabbi Yosi. Who's Sinai? Guys, remember? And the brachas, right? Rabba, Oiker Harim, Rabbi Yosef, Sinai. So we just quoted Amar Rav Yosef Halachi Ke Rabbi Yosef. So it's nice. He says we already Sinai Rav Yosef. He knew all the Torah. Halachi Ke Rabbi Yosi. So the Gemara clarifies why was there a question. He knew Rabbi Yosef said it, but maybe Rabbi Yosi only b'chamra. But maybe b'shichra, mi amar. So the Gemara says no. We compare one case to the other. Now you'll see from the flow, well, of course, by Cholamoid, we never compare cases. But here we're comparing cases. Because chamra tamamai, mishum denafresh psidei. There's a loss if you're not going to seal. Shichra nami, islay pseida. If you're not going to seal it, it doesn't matter how much dollars, there'll be a loss. And how do I know that sealing beer is important? Today there's fuzz, right? Today that foam goes away. Stama, they had no foam b'chlal. So, when you read this kasha, of course, you open up a bottle of beer, you're done in a couple of minutes. But how do you know that if you don't seal it, it gets ruined? So Abaye says, because my nursemaid, Amrali aim, that bar shit, Sovei Vishoye, it's better to get a barrel that only holds 6 of beer. If it's properly sealed, it's more valuable than getting a barrel that holds 8 that velo shoya that was unsealed. And again, you learn to just say, come on, what, he didn't know you should compare beer to wine? So now the flow is beautiful. Amarav Chama Bar Guria Amarav. The general approach when it comes to the laws of Cholamoid is Hilchas Moed. Laws of Cholamoid are just like the laws from the Kutim Behalacha. So the Kutim were that nation that Sanchedev brought into the Holy Land, and they converted out of fear because lions were going into the villages and eating up their people. Whether the conversion was a good conversion or not, is machlokes tanoim. When you don't convert altruistically, that's not the topic here. The point is that the fact is that some mitzvahs they didn't just keep; they kept perfectly. And in those mitzvahs, you can learn from them. That's the way they do it. That's the way it is. Now, normally you say if that person is so frum in one area, I can learn from that person in another area, never from the kutim. By the kutim, you never knew. It can be very chamor here, and then when it comes to another mitzvah, for some reason they barely kept it. Which don't compare a case to a case. So that's this expression. By Chol HaMoed, even though you read a halach in one area, from the whole Torah, Chol HaMoed, don't compare a case to a case. You'll make a lot of mistakes. Lamai Hilchasa, where do we find that? Lamai Nafkamina. Amar Rav Daniel Bar Katina, either Amar Rav or not. That what he means to say is that the laws of Chol HaMoed are like barren women. What's a barren woman? Rashi says that if a person marries a woman that cannot give children, then the whole relationship is just about her, not for the kids. There aren't going to be kids. Same thing with halachas. There's not, when you learn a halacha, you only know that halacha. No other halacha will benefit from it. Don't be medama milsa milsa, and that's the example. This is the point. Amar Shmuel, it's a great example. Can you coat a container? So one would think that if you are allowed to coat a larger container, you can coat a smaller container, right? That's more work, less work. But it doesn't work that way. Shmuel holds you are allowed zoifsin, you can coat a kusta. Kusta means a jug, a small container, but you cannot coat a large container. Rav Dimi from Nardo says the opposite, that you can coat a large container and you cannot coat a small container. Normally you would say, if I can do the tircha, right? If I can coat even a big container, I can do something that's of less work. Doesn't work that way. It's counterintuitive. Now the Gemara will explain why is that way and what's really underlying the machlokes. Mar chaysh l'pseidem. If you look at, you need to have loss of money to justify work, then it makes sense that by a large container, there's a greater loss, which is why there you can coat. By the smaller container, even if the keli is not that good and the contents will be absorbed or they're going to seep out, nish geferlach. Or the other side is to focus on where's there more work. So you can coat a jug because it's smaller, it's less tircha. You can't coat a bigger jug. The point is not the svara behind it. The point is that even for people like us, don't compare case to case. If you don't know the reasons behind the halacha, if you only learn Shulchan Aruch without learning all the chazal behind it, then you're not a qualified Rav, because you cannot compare a case to a case unless you are dealing with exactly the case of Shulchan Aruch. But that's especially true by Chol HaMoed. There's so much nuance behind it, and so much balancing between this isur and that heter. So just because this is mutter, it doesn't mean that's going to be mutter. Now you understand why he asked whether you can seal a beer. He knew the Mishnayos, and by oil and by wine. He knew by Chol HaMoed you got to ask for every case separately. Let's go back to it. Amar Abai, Naktinan. We have the following tradition. Amazing chavra. By Hilchas Shabbos, there are 3 levels. Remember that? Chayiv, punishment midoraisa. Then there's a concept called patur avolasur. Don't do it, but you don't have a biblical punishment. And then there's mutter. Chayiv, asur, patur. By Hilchas Moed, now going back to what Danny asked again, is working on Chol HaMoed asur midoraisa. So I want to say like this: even the Rishonim that hold that working on Chol HaMoed is asur midoraisa, it's based on a pasuk that's written in the positive, which means it's a mitzvahs asay. A mitzvahs asay doesn't have a punishment. So you will never find a biblical punishment. We'll find many rabbinic penalties. Even today we have to just get there. So he says, but all Hilchas Moed is like Hilchas Shabbos, but not in all 3. You're not going to find Chayiv, Asur, Mutter, Daf, Yud Beis, and Beis. Which 2 of the 3 will you find? Number 1 is the concept of Patal Aval Asur. Patal Aval Asur doesn't mean Midrabanan. It means that even, again, it could mean Midrabanan. It could mean that even when it's Asur Midoraisa, there will not be a penalty. I just want you to know that the source from the many Rishonim Chavre that learned that working on Chol HaMoed is Asur Doraisa, because it says it's Chag Hamatzois Tishmoir Shivas Yamin. They put it together. Shivas Yamin means Chol HaMoed. Tishmoir, so that's considered a wording in the positive. Now there's a whole topic about it. Many times the word Tishmoir is like a lav. Anyway, it's considered the mitzvahs asay if it is midoraisa. And v'yesh mehem, that's mutar lachatchila. In other words, what will you not find? You're not going to find someone who worked on Chol HaMoed and they're going to biblically get a penalty. There won't be malchus, there won't be worse punishments. So it's either going to be asur or it's going to be mutar lachatchila. Rafuna chatztu le chatzada b'mayada. What happened was that he had a field and there was something growing on it. Now for people who work the land, you have to understand that harvesting prior to when it's ripe is bad. Certain products, when it's ready to be harvested, if you don't harvest it now, you'll wait another couple of days, it's going to get ruined. Davar ha'aved. Harvesting is a bona fide isur doirais on Shabbos. But again, what are we learning? Davar ha'aved is mutter. Now, we also learned in the first Mishnah if there's a tirchi yisera issue, but how do you define that? So the Gemara tells you that Rav Huna had his field harvested on Chol HaMoed, because it was a davar ha'aved. Hold on. I learned in a Braisa, Toichen and Kamech B'Moyed, you are allowed to grind grain on Cholamoyed only if Yakir L'Tzoyrech HaMoyed. But Shaloi L'Tzoyrech HaMoyed Asur. Another din, Davar Ha'avud B'Moyed, if you will not attend it. If you won't attend it, you're going to lose principle. Mutar L'Asoyse B'Moyed. That sounds good already, right? That's the case of Rav Huna, because he didn't need all those grains on Yom Tov, but Davar She'eino Avav B'Moyed Asur. Problem is, here's the problem. Says the Braisa, when do we use the heter of Davar Ha'aved? You can do malacha, even if it's not L'Tzoyrech HaMoed, because you're going to lose the principle. Only if the item upon which you are working is already Telushim Min HaKarka. If it's not part of real estate. Bambakasha. Avol mechuber lakarka, but anything that's connected to the ground, I feel like kulay avot befedish. Even if you will not attend it, that will mean that you're going to lose it, and all of it, that's life, asur, herst. And going back to what Samach said before, like we don't say b'chtei sheya'asu, or b'chtei sheya'asu, we don't give that heter by working on real estate. We don't say, okay, they worked, so the person cannot use that. Sometimes you may never use it, because when something is connected to the ground, more people see it. It's done in public by nature. It's out there, at least in many cases. And since many onlookers see what's happening, therefore there were more machmir. There's no davar ha'avar heter. That all this is akasha. There's one heter. If you don't have what to eat, but that's called tzorech hamoyed. And by the way, the kasha is based on the premise that Rav Huna was not poor. He wasn't the guy that didn't have what to eat. Then, but
everyone needs to know that you are poor.
Everyone needs to know that you're poor. Very good. And not only that, when you do that, don't do it using oxen. Normally, the way they would thresh is that you have to trample on the grain to separate it before you winnow it. Don't use parais. Don't use oxen. Now, why can you not use oxen? We'll see in a moment. Okay, that's the kasha. Rav Huna was not on the category of ein loy ma yoichal. So the Gemara says, this Braisa is very chamur. This Braisa that's differentiating by a davar ha'avid, that if it's mechuber, you can't do work, but it's only das yachid. And we don't have to paskin like that. Amalei, this Braisa is only yichidahi. And the v'loy svirol an kavasei. And the Tanya, klal Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, in the name of Rabbi Yosi. This is Rabbi Yosi. That davar hatolush min hakarka. Afilu only miktsasei avud. If you will leave it unattended, then you can work on cholamoid, even if there's no tzorech hamoyed. Second line. But if it's mechuber lekarka, afilu koli avod is asur. Notice we found who is the yachid. The das yichida is Rabbi Yosi. And even though we learned on Amud Aleph, it's all a flow. What did we learn on Amud Aleph? What did Sinai say? Halacha ki Rabbi Yosi. Halacha ki Rabbi Yosi, don't compare cases. That was, if the question is, there's a davar ha'avid, when you are allowed to do it, do you have to make a shinoi or not make a shinoi? That is where we paskin like Rabbi Yosi. Don't think we always paskin like Rabbi Yosi. No, b'chlal in klali ashas, I want you to know that Rabbi Yosi in the Mukai Imai, if you remember, normally we paskin like Rabbi Yosi against cholamoyet. So for this question, if it's tolush mechuber, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yosi. Weiter. Now the only problem is that now that we identified that this is Rabbi Yosi, now Rabbi Yosi doesn't allow you to do it for davar ha'avid, but Rabbi Yosi allowed you to do it for tzorech hamoyed. Now what did we learn in Amud Aleph? And what did we learn in the beginning of the Perek? That whenever Rabbi Yosi allows, you don't even have to make a shinoi. So now that we identified this price, now we have a new question. Why may you not use oxen? Then you should be allowed to use oxen because the whole source, the whole need of doing a shinoi is whenever you read that, but davar ha'avid is never like Rabbi Yosi. Answers the Gemara that don't think that everyone threshes with oxen and the reason why you don't use oxen is for a shinoi. That's not the reason. You know how we know that from the Metzias. Amalei hachi nami kiven the chol yoyim elav beparas daishi. Go out there and see, how do people thresh? Many people in a weekday, they don't use oxen. They had other kalim. So why should you not use oxen? It's not because of a shinoi. You know why? Rabbi Yosi doesn't need to do a shinoi. You know what he wants? You know what Rabbi Yosi doesn't want? Like, let me go back. Rabbi Yosi is the one who says, talush and mechuber. What's the difference? Befaresia. When you do something that's mechuber, and you're going to use oxen, it makes a commotion. It's noisy. In other words, we want, even when you are allowed to do it, it brings a certain chulin, like Re'echen in Kain Gadol, whether we accept it, that I don't want to walk in the street and hear knocking of construction, even when it's security related. That's why, but not because of a shinoi. Let's go weiter. Now let's go. When we say tzorech hamoed, another thing has to be clarified. How much are you allowed to ground? How much? Biful. So like this, so that I'll say it by heart. I'm not allowed to grind beyond what I need, but I can grind abundantly. Even though under normal circumstances there will be some leftovers. Again, that's the concept. So, toichanin b'moyed, only that which is needed for the moyed. You cannot grind on moyed, right? Shaloi l'tzorech hamoed is asur. But don't think you have to, oh my God, do I need to have 5 pounds of flowers or 7 pounds of flour? Not 50. 50 I don't need. I can make the 7. And even though I know maybe or most probably, do it abundantly. Now, ve'im tachan v'hoisir, no problem. Harei mutter. As long as there is a potential, if guests would have come, I would have needed it. It has to be possible for moed. Same thing also. Koitetzim eitzim b'moed. You're allowed to cut branches. L'tzorech hamoed. But shaloi l'tzorech hamoed, asur. But ve'im katetz, if you cut branches and v'hoisir, harei mutter. Third example, matilan shecher b'moed. You are allowed to brew beer on chol hamoed if you need it for the yontif. Shaloi l'tzorech hamoed, to brew a tremendous amount that you know no way you're going to need this, then asur. But ve'im heitel v'hoisir, but again, you're allowed to do it abundantly, and even if there's going to be leftovers, harei mutter. But here we go. In other words, there's a certain point where you say that's already a subterfuge in English. Like, come on, you can do it abundantly whenever you know yada inish benafshe that you're doing. No way you're going to use this.
You can't say I want that barrel of beer.
You can't say. Let me say the better. How do you define tzorech hamoed? I'll give you an example of if you would be allowed to use harama. Let's say I have beer, but can I say I don't want the beer that I have? I want new beer, and then make new beer, and then say, you know what? The old beer was better. That's called harama. This Braisa says you're not allowed to do it. Machlokes tanoim. Another Braisa says viriminu. Steht noch a Braisa matilan shecher b'moed l'tzorech hamoed, but shaloi l'tzorech hamoed asur. You can't do it straight for after Yom Tif. What beer are we talking about? Echad shecher tamanim, whether it's date beer, whether it's shecher so'idim, barley beer, which is probably more like the beer that we have today. However, yakir va'afa pishi yesh lo yashon. But if a person has beer, then ma'adim v'shoisim and achadish, they can say, I want to make beer because I don't like that beer. I'm making fresh, and then they won't drink it. Then they can say, no, I want to go back to those. So you are allowed to do it. So a contradiction. So the Gemara says, yes, there is no way to reconcile it. It must be Tanoyehi, the Tanya, Ein Marimin Bekach, Rabbi Ma'arimin. We are comparing Chol Hamoed to Hilchas Shabbos. Now, what we learned in Hilchas Shabbos was regarding that case, you have a barrel of wine that cracked. There's halachas over there regarding doing things on Shabbos for the week. Can you salvage the wine? Again, you're not breaking a malacha, but you're working for the week. So it says over there, you can only salvage the amount of wine that you need for Shabbos. And if you have guests, then you can salvage for the guests. So the question is, can I invite guests that I know they're not going to drink wine, but for every guest, I can salvage the shear that they need? So that's a machlokes tanoim. That's called a harama. So there's just like there's a machlokes whether we are allowed to do this harama by Shabbos. It's imagining Chol Hamoed is like Shabbos. That's the bottom line. We begin that it's a day that it's asur b'malacha with a tatum. Let's go weiter. Rav, similar to the story we had of Rav Huna, Rav chatztu lei chatzada b'chol meyada. He had a field, and the harvest was ready. Punt on Chol Hamoed, and they harvested. They reaped. Koitzer. That's mamash malach. Shama Shmuel ikbet. Fragt die Gemara, hold on. We already established that when the harvest time is there, if you don't harvest it now, it's going to get spoiled. That's called a davar ha'avad. Why would it be makbid? Because of the Braisa. But we already said the Braisa is only Rabbi Yossi. So leima Shmuel ki yichidas firolei. So the Gemara says no. Again, we're comparing cases and cases, apples and oranges. You know what type of wheat has to be harvested right away? Barley. Makes sense. Behemoths are impatient. It's a behemish thing to be impatient. Right away. Michael Adam, wheat. If you don't harvest it now, you can harvest it next week. Loi, chatzdo dechita hava. Rav was a wheat harvest, and dolei have a pasit. Now we have a problem. So if it's not a davar ha'aved, then why were you allowed to do it? What was the other heter that we learned about? You don't have what to eat. Rav didn't have what to eat. I v'Rav my tamo aved ache ein lema yochel hava. So why was Shmuel upset? Shmuel loisimua kamei. Shmuel was not given all the information. Shmuel didn't know. You see, that's how it goes. As Allah Lashon Hara. If Shmuel would have known that Rav Taka didn't have what to eat, and let me go back, it's not like since you can reap, we learned. You can reap abundantly, but not for afterwards. He did it, Rav didn't know, or, this is number 2 for today, Adam Chashav Shani. Rav is Rav. Rav was the head of the whole bubble, the head of the yeshiva and surah. It was expected for him to go beyond the letter of the law. And that's the way of the world. In other words, we look up to people that we look up to. And we consider them greater than us. So we don't do what they do. If they do that, I can behave one notch down. That's more or less the way people think. So if they already are only keeping the letter of the law, then one notch down is Rahman al-Islam. If they go Lifnim Yishur Sadin, then we keep the halach. Weiter. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Nafak b'chumarta the medoisha. There were 2 things. Number 1, he went out, this is Shabbos. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry. Ornaments are not called carrying. He had a signet ring. If a signet ring is made out of metal, it's called an ornament. That we learn on Shabbos. If the signet ring is made b'chumarta de medoish, it's made with medoish wood, that's not considered ornamental, it's only considered functional. That is something that may not be worn in public. Now, is it muksa? Is it not muksa? Can you move it? Can you wear it? So he wore it in his chatzir. If it would be muksa, then he would be violating the law. If we don't consider it muksa, then there is like a chumrah that you can say, don't wear it in the chatzir, because you might forget and carry it outside, and it's not considered ornamental. So he was doing number 1. Number 2, the ishta maya da achim kapela. He would drink hot water that was cooked by a non-Jewish cook. Are we allowed to have water that was cooked by a goy? That's the case. What is the issue? It's called bishul akum, something that was cooked by a goy. We, b'poyel, will have coffee made by a goy because of the 2 basic rules. One of them is which, that if anything could be eaten uncooked, then you can have it even though they cooked it. Again, by the letter of the law, it was okay. And he would take a drink water that was warmed up by you don't need a cook to cook water, but that's the Metzias. The cook was the one that cooked, the non-Jewish cook. Shama Rav Ami, regarding Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyav, ikpat, and he became upset. So the question is why? Amar Rabbi Yosef, my tama ikpat. Let's go. If he felt that he was violating a drabanan, which is muksa, it's not muksa. Why is it not muksa? Because we learned hashirim, brooches, hanazamim, nose rings, bahatabois, and normal rings. And this is a big sugya. But as we learned, even though again this ring was not considered ornamental, but it's not muksa because this is something called the keli shemalachta le'isir. Let's quickly just say the words, and you can move it. L'tzayrech gufay, l'tzayrech mekoymay. Since you are allowed to move it, it's not considered muksa.
What's ornamental?
Ornamental means it's a tachshit. A tachshit you can even wear, and this ring is not. The whole thing of wood means that it was not. It was only functional. So harei hein kachol kelim hanatolim b'chatzar. It's since you can move it. Let's say it's not muksa. It's not muksa. Why was he upset? And number 2, ve'imishum de ishta mayim. And if it's because he would drink water, huh?
Wearing it. It's not the same.
We'll get ishkoyach dani. Okay, good. You're good. Good way. The Gemara will speak it out. Very good. That's the point. Now, mishum de ishta mayim da achem kapel armo. If it's because he drank water that was heated by a non-Jew, what's the problem? This is very important. Right? These are the 2 basic heterim. And anything that could be consumed as it is prior to it being cooked, even though now it is cooked, hot water. So the point is, in both cases, you're right. He did not break the law. In both cases, there is a place to be machmir beyond the law, and we expect of an adam chashuv to go and be machmir beyond the letter of the law. And exactly what Dani just said, that yes, I'm allowed to move something. When I wear something, there's a new chashash. The chashash is, since it's on me, I'm wearing it, and during the week I would wear these rings, I'll forget that I'm wearing it, and now I'll end up carrying it. I'll take it outside. It's very important. That's a big sugya. Our sugya holds that the prohibition of wearing it in the chutzner is not me'ikar adin. I'm not saying we paskin that way. Eloma lifnim mishuras adin. Water, imagine, he would not drink a coffee that was not made by a yid because the water was heated by a goy. That we now all paskin, that's lifnim mishuras adin, but it was expected from an adam chashuv to go beyond the letter of the law. Let's keep on weiter. Amarav Chananel Amarav. Adam dekel b'moed. You are allowed to cut a palm tree down on Chol HaMoed. The big chiddush now. If all you need is the sawdust, you need the sawdust for Chol HaMoed. But to get sawdust, you don't need to cut down a tree. Cutting down a tree is called tircha yesera. He's being very lenient. You have to really need the sawdust, but it's not called harama. Even though you could have gotten the sawdust by doing something else which would have been much less of an exertion, you can cut down a ganze tree to get the sawdust. However, Layit Allah Abaye was very upset with that. Come on. If you need sawdust, get it from a source which you won't have to exert yourself that much. Now, so you see a machloikas between Abaye and Rav, basically. So says the Gemara, Rav Ashi Havalei Abba. Abba means a forest. He owned a forest in the village called Bishilanya, and Rav Ashi went Rav Ashi needed sawdust, and he went to the forest, or he had workers going there to cut down a tree. Amalei Rav Shila, who was the Rav in this village, Mishilanya, let Rav Ashi, my daitach. The Ka'amar Rav Chanan Lamarav Koitzes Adam Dekel B'Moyed Afal Pisha Ein Sarach Elul in a Swedish Shaloi. I know that Rav said that, but let's not forget that Abaye would curse someone who did that. So Amalei Rav Ashi says, okay, the machloikas, I know that, I know this. V'lo Shemi'ali. Shemi'ah doesn't mean he didn't know what Abaye says. It means I don't agree with Abaye. I follow Rav. Okay, well, you know what happened? So again, by the letter of the law, he paskin like Rav. What happened was, Ishtamet Nargo, the axe slipped out of his hand. It sounds like he was cutting himself. And Boyel and Mifsekei L'Shakeh, it almost severed his thigh. He almost got a terrible wound. So again, this is the whole concept. This is not called nichush, not nichush, but it's a simin. So he says, you know what? Even though me'ikir adin, I know I'm right, but if this happened, shafkein v'hadar aseh, he left the forest and he came back home, and from then on, he sided more with Abaye. This whole concept of how to interpret hashgacha pratis. Here you have a story that Rav Ashi Taich. Now this means, again, Adam Chashav. It's right at the Adam Chashav. It's not that Rav is right, but I'm going to follow Abaye. Next, Rav Yehuda Shara L'Me'ekar Kitana. Rav Yehuda allowed for people to uproot flax. This is on Chol HaMoed. And U'Lemiktar Kashus, and to cut hops. And U'Leme'ekar Shum Shamei, and to uproot this Shum Shamei plant, all on Chol HaMoed. Problem is that you're only allowed to do this. What did we learn in the Braisa? L'kol ha'alma. Only l'tzoyrech hamoyed, right? Only if you don't have l'tzoyrech hamoyed. The problem is that this shum shemei, when you uproot that, whatever you can use needs to first be dried. It takes many days for it to get dried. So by default, it's not for now. So Amar le'abai le'Rabbi Yosef bishloima ki tana flax. I get it. Chazi lechafifa. Without processing it as it is, you can use it, for example, to cover food. Keshusa hops are good for beer. We just learned above that if you don't have beer, you can make beer on Chol HaMoed. Elam, this shum shamei, let the Kavan find a picture of shum shamei. Good luck. Lamai chazi. I have no idea. It's good. In English, I also don't know what it means without the picture. It's a product, yakir, it's a certain herb that they would take the seeds out of it and use the seeds. Those seeds were moist and they would always have to leave it to dry for a couple of days. In other words, there's no use for Chol HaMoed. L'may chazi, and elamatz for afterwards. That's shaloi l'tzorech hamoyed. So answers the Gemara, chazi, L'nezoye de ispuhu. Nezoye meant that sometimes inside this plant there were seeds that were already dried out. Those seeds, maybe, again, this sin.
The whole thing.
You're doing the whole thing to go after those seeds. Exactly, Shuki. Now, Rabbi Yanai Havlu Pardes, he owned the orchard. The Matei Zimnei B'Chalo D'Mayado. The time of harvesting is on Cholamoid. What are we learning now? We don't paskin like Yichida Rabbi Yosi. In other words, if I didn't put it for Cholamoid, it was not ripe before Yom Tiv. Now it's ripe. If I'm going to leave the fruits, what will happen? It will lose. It will become devalued. Davar ha'aved. You are allowed to harvest it. And Itaka harvested it. Is katvei, he picked the fruits. What happened? It's in public, right? That's the whole issue. That's Rabbi Yosi. Everyone saw at Yakir that he harvested his orchard. You know what happened next year? L'shana, next year, even the people that could have harvested their orchards prior to Yom Tiv, they said, Rabbi Yanai harvested it on Cholamoyed. Anyways, on Cholamoyed there's no school and there's no work. They delayed it, dafka for Cholamoyed. Shahua kula alma leparadisayu l'chelo d'meyado. So Rabbi Yanai saw that even though he followed the letter of the law, he caused people to do something wrong. So he wanted to do tshuva. So what was his tshuva? His tshuva was he felt that this year's harvest, I'm not going to have any bid from. Afkere Rabbi Yanai lepardisa yushata as a gesture of tshuva for him having benefited, even though he did it beheted. Again, Adam Chashav, he saw how people copied him and they compared a case to a case when they shouldn't have, but people compare cases to cases. So Chachamim, Hizoharu b'dvareichem, is said in particular when it comes to Cholamoid. I did the best I could. God willing, we'll have to start running tomorrow even quicker.